Welcome back to Down to Disness, a monthly show where I pick a Disney animated movie and talk about its history and its impact on pop culture. This month's movie is Cinderella, released in 1950, Disney's second princess movie. This episode's gonna be a lot about Disney princesses because Cinderella had a lot to do with the history and the evolution of the Disney princess lineup. Let's give this movie a little bit of context. Snow White was a huge box office success for Disney, and they didn't really have another hit that big until Cinderella. Making a movie as expensive and intricate as Cinderella was a huge risk. They invested $3 million into the making of this movie, and it paid off. People claim that if this movie had failed at the box office, it would have been the end of the Disney studios. No more Disney. That means no more Elsa, you guys. What would we do without Elsa? But of course it was a huge success, and it allowed Disney to have enough money to continue making movies and also start building Disneyland in that very same decade. And so Cinderella will always be known as the princess that saved the Disney company. There's a lot of animation history to Cinderella, namely that it was the first movie that the 9 old men all worked on together at Disney. If you don't know who the 9 old men are, they were basically 9 animators who were the core of Disney animation for a huge chunk of Disney animation history. Basically 9 of Disney's most famous and most talented animators. Begin legacy. To save money on animation, a lot of this movie used live-action reference modeling. Like we saw with Alice in Wonderland, this is when they would have live-action models come in for them to sketch out before fully animating a scene. Helene Stanley was the live-action model for Cinderella, but she was also the live-action model for Anita from 101 Dalmatians and Aurora from Sleeping Beauty. If you'll notice, they kind of all have slender, almost angular joints. They kind of are all similar. They're tall and lean and proportioned the same. It's because they're all from the same reference model. What's kind of funny is that Eileen Woodson, the voice of Cinderella, didn't even intend to audition for the voice of Cinderella. She had done some voice recordings for her friends, and those friends took the recordings and sent them to Disney without telling her. And she ended up beating over 300 girls for the part of Cinderella. But she didn't know until Disney just called her up. Now she's a famous Disney legend. Eileen Woodson and a lot of other people claim that Walt Disney was the first person ever to use double-tracked vocals. If you don't know what I'm talking about, think about the song Sing Sweet Nightingale, where Cinderella's voice is layered over itself. It's Eileen Woodson singing all of the different melodies and harmonies by herself. A lot of other very famous Disney voice actors were in Cinderella. Eleanor Audley voiced Lady Tremaine, but you'll also recognize her as the voice of Maleficent and Madame Leota on the Haunted Mansion. Yup. And then there's Verna Fenton, who voiced the fairy godmother, but she also voiced Mrs. Jumbo from Dumbo, the Queen of Hearts from Alice in Wonderland, and Flora from Sleeping Beauty. Like I said, Cinderella was a very important movie in terms of Disney princess history and creating what we know today as the Disney princess official lineup. Cinderella was the second Disney princess, but she was the first Disney princess who was not born royal, but rather married into royalty. She was also the first Disney princess to be seen as a child, and she has the honor to be part of Walt Disney's favorite piece of animation ever. The famous scene where her ripped apart dress turns into the silver ball gown is Walt Disney's favorite piece of animation ever. Who knows what he would think if he saw Tangled or Frozen, but that's what he said his favorite piece of animation was of all time. It is really beautiful and iconic. I can't blame him. The Cinderella soundtrack is super famous because Disney often uses the song A Dream is a Wish Your Heart Makes in all advertising campaigns. But what's funny is that Bibbidi-Bobbidi-Boo was actually a really big pop hit in the 50s because Perry Como did a cover of it. What's interesting is that this was the first Disney movie to have its soundtrack copyrighted and published within the Walt Disney Music Company. Movie soundtracks were used for not a lot else other than to just sell sheet music before this, but the Walt Disney Music Company started a standard for how we now handle movie soundtracks to this day. There's actually a really beautiful song called Dancing on a Cloud that was cut from Cinderella, but lucky for you, it's available to watch online. Here's a clip for you right now. A lot of people think Cinderella is boring and anti-feminist, but Walt himself said, I think, the smartest quote about Cinderella, which is that she's a person who had a dream and went out and got it. She didn't wait for things to happen to her, she pursued, and she made her dreams become a reality. But for real, Disney princesses are such an ingrained part of all of our childhoods, and we all know about them and we recognize them. It's such a big part of pop culture history, and it's really interesting to see the progression from Snow White to Cinderella to Aurora to the 90s princesses. And she did a lot of things that we don't give her credit for. And she got her own castle. And it's really big. Cinderella is obviously a story that means a lot to the Disney company. They just did a live-action re-release, which was amazing if you haven't seen it. I think it did the original story justice, and it filled in all the holes that were kind of in the original story, and they made the prince a lot more likable. It's actually said that Cinderella is little girls' favorite Disney princess of all of them. I don't know if that statistic was pre or post Elsa, but I'm gonna go with it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you found this interesting and that you learned something today. Leave a comment below saying what movie you would like to see me do next, and be sure to check out my last episode, which was on Tarzan. Woo! Until I see you guys next time, have an amazing day, and I love you very much. Bye!